Good morning, Mr. Soni. Good morning, Mr. Molefe. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chairperson.
Are we ready?
Yes, we are.
Okay, all right. Let's continue. The oath that you took yesterday, Mr. Molefe, will continue to apply. Thank you.
Yes, Chairperson.
Ms. Molefe, yesterday...
1 second.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know whether this distance is enough. Do you want to sit a little further? Yeah, okay. No, I don't think further that side. I think further that way. I'm trying to make sure that there is enough social distance between us.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Son.
As you please, Chairperson. Ms. Molefe, yesterday we were dealing with your replying affidavit in this Refambo matter, you remember?
I do remember, Chairperson.
And you recall that we adjourned on the basis that you hadn't read the document in a long time and we would give you an opportunity to look at it.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, have you had an opportunity to look at your replying affidavit?
I did, Chairperson.
And as far as your recollection now goes, is what's contained in the replying affidavit what happened?
That is correct, Chairperson. I confirm.
So to the extent that there was an indication that not all the documents were contained in the envelope given to Mr. Mamabolo, you confirm that the documents that you name in your affidavit were in fact contained in that envelope?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Can I just ask, did you check that with Mr. Mamabolo between yesterday and today?
I did do so, Chairperson.
Now, I just want to ask you, did you also read Mr. Mashaba's response to your replying affidavit?
I did, Chairperson.
And when one looks at it, is there much difference between your version and his version?
There's very little difference. I think he refers to paragraph 9.4 and paragraph 10 where he says he disagrees. But overall, he agrees with the content of the affidavit. And to the extent that he says he disagrees with me, I refute that because I based my affidavit on the documents that he gave to Mr. Mamabolo in an envelope.
Just 1 second. I just want to check maybe both you, Mr. Soni, and Mr. Molefe, you might just raise your voices a bit.
As you please.
I want to check with the transcribers. Are you able to hear everybody? They give a thumbs up, so they can hear you better than I can hear you. But I think let's try and raise our voices a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, just for the record, Mr. Molefe, can I ask you to turn to page 327, which is where his response starts?
Just place on record again what bundle we are still on.
Bundle D, Exhibit SS.
Okay, you are speaking away from the mic.
Bundle D, Exhibit SS6.
Yes, okay. And what page do you?
Page 327.
Okay.
So I just look at the areas of difference very quickly, Mr. Molefe. So if you look at what was crucial about your evidence is the meeting, and at paragraph 65 of his affidavit in response to paragraph 9.6 of your affidavit, he says, I admit that a meeting took place between me and Mr. Molefe at the Maslow Hotel in Sandton on the 31st of August 2015. You confirm that?
I confirm it. Confirm it, Chairperson.
And then, in fact, he hardly disputes anything. In particular, he says at paragraph 71 of his affidavit that you did ask him about the contributions, but he says it wasn't in relation to Swafambo. He says it was in relation to his contributions to the ANC. What do you say about that, Mr.?
I deny that, Chairperson. I did not know Mr. Mashaba. At that stage, I did not even know if he was a member of the ANC. And I would not have asked him if he was making any contribution to the ANC.
And what was the purpose?
I'm sorry, Mr. Soni. Shouldn't we just have Mashaba's paragraph 71 read first to hear what he says, and then Mr. Molefe can respond to that version? I think 72, 73, I think you would know better, but I see that he seems to talk about what transpired in that meeting in those paragraphs, but you can take the points point by point.
Yes. So let's, just to put it in context, Mr. Molefe, if you go to page, keep your finger on page 328, but if you go to page 263, that is where you make the allegation about asking him for the proof of the proof of the contributions.
Page 20?
Page 263.
263.
What of course can be done, Mr. Soni, even without necessarily reading the paragraphs, except insofar as Mr. Molefe might wish to refresh his memory, is to put to him what his version, Mr. Molefe's version was, and how Mr. Mashaba responds to that point by point, and then he can deal with them point by point. That's another way, but I'll leave it to you how you deal with it here, whichever is convenient.
Now, if you look at from paragraph 9.6 on page 262 to 9.12 on page 263, this is where Mr. Mashaba is asking you for assurances that there won't be any consequences for him. Would that be correct?
That is correct, Chairperson.
And your response to him when he asked for those assurances was what? That you would like proof that those payments were made.
That is correct. But
now, in the context of the conversation on the 31st of August at Maslow, what was the proof in relation to?
in relation to the payment?
Yes.
Well, the proof was in relation to what he said were monies he was requested to pay to Ms. Maria Gomez. And the monies that he said were through a company called, which was paid into the account, a company called Similex, a couple of installments. And the money that was paid to Mr. Ngosi Sabelo.
Sorry, I just want to get the context again. That was, he needed to pay that as a result of what?
Or maybe let me put it differently, because I think I know what Mr. Soni is looking for. This might help. As you understood the position at the meeting, the payments that he said he had made to Similex and to Mr. Nkosi Sabelo, or his company, was he talking about payments that he was making to Similex and to Nkosi Sabelo Incorporated personally, or was he talking about payments that he was making on behalf of somebody else or on behalf of some entity?
He was not, the context was that he said that he was asked by Ms. Gomez, Maria Gomez, to pay money into those accounts, and the money was linked to the money that PRASA would pay to Sifambo. But she said that money, she needed that money for what she called the movement. So that was the context.
Okay.
So it was the money that Swifambo was receiving as a result of its contract with PRASA, and it was receiving that money from PRASA.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Was
Because she had said earlier that this contract is going, it's a contract amounting to billions. It shouldn't be difficult for you to give 10% of that to the movement. And I must hasten to say that I don't know Ms. Gomez myself.
Yes, this is what was relayed to you by Mr. Mashaba at that meeting.
That is correct.
As having been said to him by Ms. Gomez.
That is correct.
Yeah. And during the meeting, was there a common understanding between you and Mr. Mashaba as to what the reference to the movement was?
The common understanding, well, I think he understood that as well.
Yes.
But the common understanding of what the movement was and is now is the African National Congress.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Now, it is in that context that we look at what Mr. Mashaba says at page 328, paragraph 71. And can you just say more or less, can you just paraphrase what he says in relation to the payment at paragraph 71? If you want, you can just read it into the record.
And that is...
at page 328, paragraph 71.
Is the lighting fine for reading purposes there, Mr. Molefe?
It is okay.
It is fine.
It is fine, Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
He says at the meeting on, that is paragraph 71, he says, at the meeting, that Mr. Mashaba says, at the meeting on 31st August 2015, Mr. Molefe asked me whether I supported the ANC financially.
Now, if you could just stop there. Did you ever ask that question?
I did not ask that question.
The context in which this interaction took place on the 31st was that he had called for the meeting. Mr. Mashaba had called.
He had called for the meeting, and it was about how he could preserve the assets that he had accumulated before he became part of the Sifambo tender.
Now, with reference to that sentence in that paragraph, Is your version that you never asked this question in relation to him personally, or is the position that you never even asked it in relation to Sivambo? In case you said you meaning Sivambo because he was part of Sivambo, and he thought that you meant him personally.
I did not ask the question, Chairperson,
Yes.
to him
In any
personally
form.
or
Yes.
in the context of him
Yes.
being the chairman of Sifambo. I didn't
Okay.
ask.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, while on that point, at the meeting, did you know, or before the meeting, did you know that he had made contributions to the ANC?
I did not know that he made any contribution to the ANC chairperson. I should just draw the attention of the commission, the chairperson, to the fact that that meeting was asked for by him. And I was listening to him. He is the first one who told us of individuals and or companies that he paid money to, which then gave rise to me saying, but we would need to see the records of those payments.
Then sorry, carry on. He then says, I did not think.
Then he says, I did not think, I'm now continuing that paragraph, Chairperson, that is paragraph 71. And he says, I did not think there was anything untoward about his line of questioning, as I held Mr. Molefe in high regard and understood him to be a loyal, respected senior member of the ANC. To my mind, the discussion in respect of the ANC had no relevance to the issues between PRASA and Sifambo.
What is your reaction to that?
No, he is correct, because at that stage there was no reason for us to speculate about what the relationship could have been between Sifambo and the ANC.
But
Yes.
he says it had no relevance.
He says it had no relevance, and he is correct. It had no relevance at that stage.
Well, I don't understand, because
What I'm saying is that firstly, I did not ask you.
yes,
So it didn't arise. But I also agree with him that the meeting was not about the relationship between Sifambo and the ANC. But neither was it about relationship between Sifambo and PRASA. It was about his concerns regarding what the implications of the investigations that PRASA was conducting might have on him as a person and the assets that he had accumulated before he joined Sifambo.
Would the position be that the relevance of any relationship that the ANC may have had with Sifambo, would the position be that that relevance, if any, would have arisen once he said that the payments that Sifambo had made to Ms. Gomez were for the movement? Is that when the relevance of the ANC would have arisen?
Chairperson, without any further evidence that monies given to Mrs. Maria Gomez flew to the ANC, I do not know how one could. Well, it would be the relevance in the fact that he mentioned the movement.
Yes, what I mean is, My expectation is that if you are in a meeting such as the meeting that you had with Mr. Mashaba on that day, where he was coming to, I don't know whether plead is the correct word, but to talk to you to say, please don't touch my assets. I've worked hard for these assets without Swivambo, you know. Whatever investigation is done. If in that context, and in the context of the fact that you and your board were conducting investigations into allegations of corruption at PRASA, if somebody said part of the money that is paid to Swivambo is actually going to the ANC, there might be no proof at that stage, but my expectation is that that would raise that would make the ANC and its relationship, call it alleged relationship, either with Ms. Gomez or with Swivambo, relevant, because you would be saying, well, is it possible that proceeds of corruption are going to my movement? That they may be going to the governing party, and therefore you might say, well, I want proof of that. I want to see all of those things, because maybe the ANC doesn't know that this money comes from corruption. Maybe it does know, but this would be a serious allegation if somebody makes it. That's my thinking of what you would think.
Chairperson, at that meeting, I don't know, Mr. Mashaba. At best, that would simply say, what was your state of mind?
Yes.
Which would have existed in mind
Yes.
that, well, part of the
Yes.
additional evidence
Yes.
that we would, I want to see,
Yes.
would probably prove his point.
Yeah.
But it is not something that I said to him, I want evidence to
Yes.
see
Yeah.
whether those monies went to the ANC. But
Yes.
naturally, in my state of mind,
Yes.
I would have been concerned.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So there are two issues, Mr. Molefe. One is he calls the meeting to say, please don't take away my assets because your investigations will show I gave certain monies to a Ms. Gomez. That was part of the purpose of the meeting.
That is, well, once he started talking about people he paid monies to, clearly his fear was that he would be implicated in the investigation.
Yeah.
Ms. Molefe, I'm just trying to understand your state of mind. You file your founding affidavit in the Swivambo matter, in which you say the Swivambo contract was tainted by corruption.
That is correct.
Right. Investigations are done, and then you discover certain things. But Mr. Mashaba, in the meantime, comes to you and says, look, man, you may discover certain things. You may discover these payments. Before you discover them, I want to reveal them to you. Is that the sequence of events?
That is correct.
Now, what the chairperson is saying is, when he says these payments were made to Ms. Gomez to give to the movement, that's what you must have understood, that the payments were made to Ms. Gomez allegedly to be paid to the movement.
That is correct. But that is in my state of mind. That's not what I asked him.
No.
Oh,
I
yes.
think,
Yes.
I think we
Yes.
understand that. You didn't ask him. I think the question simply arose because there was the question of Yeah, because you said you agreed with Mr. Mashaba's statement that the relationship between, I think, either Swivambo or Ms. Gomez was irrelevant. And you said you agree that at that stage, that was the term you used, it was irrelevant. And certainly I thought that what you meant was at a certain stage, I had no information about the ANC possibly getting paid or allegedly getting paid out of this, therefore it was irrelevant. But then I was thinking that based on the fact that your evidence is that at a certain stage in the meeting, Mr. Mashaba did say, Ms. Gomez said these payments to be made to her company were for the movement. I then thought at that stage, I would not expect you to think that allegation is irrelevant. I would expect that you would say, well, if what you are telling me is correct, then I'm very concerned. So I would therefore wait to see what proof there is, because my expectation is certainly that if you were to be presented with proof that your movement is being given, shall I call it, dirty money from corruption, that's not what you would like your movement to, that's not the kind of money you'd like it to receive. And that's the kind of thing that if somebody makes an allegation like that, that you would like to see if there's proof of it. So I think that's where I was coming from. But when you said at that stage you became concerned, but there was no proof, I was happy to leave it at that. But I want to make sure that we are on the same page.
Maybe I'm struggling to articulate myself.
If I knew another language that you knew, I would say speak it, but I'm limited in my languages.
Chairperson, perhaps to say that there would have been no relevance may not be correct. But to say that although the purpose of the meeting had to do with his concerns about his personal assets, once he brought in the question of paying monies to people who said that they need the money on behalf of the movement, it raises the important question of potential involvement of the movement or the ANC in matters that affect him, Swivambo, and Mrs. Gomez.
Yes. No, I think that fits in with what I expected would be the position. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
And Mr. Molefe, it comes against the backdrop that you'd already alleged in the founding affidavit that the Swivambo contract was tainted.
Yes, sir.
And so this just was, in a sense, proof of the nature of the tainting. Not only was it an irrational contract for PRASA to have entered into, but you also know now that funds were being diverted to somebody else, which then turned out to be allegedly the movement. Would that be accurate?
That is correct.
Then,
I'm sorry, for what it's worth, I just want to say that Of course, at this stage, we have no proof that money from Sifambo was paid to the ANC. We certainly, I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if there's something in the documents that I haven't seen yet. But if anybody made such an allegation, it would be such a serious allegation because, not only because it would be wrong for any party, but to receive such monies knowingly. Maybe I should emphasize that knowingly, knowing where they were coming from. But it would be much more serious when that party is the governing party, because part of the questions that many South Africans, I think, ask when they look at the levels of corruption in our country, particularly within the public service, the SOEs, part of the questions that they should be asking or are asking is, who were the people who were supposed to make sure that this did not happen? Both within government and outside of government, within the executive and outside of the executive. And the question arises whether some of those people or some of those bodies and organizations turned a blind eye because they may have been benefiting. So those questions in this kind of investigation that the Commission is doing, we've got to keep our minds open to check. Is it possible that here, so-and-so could have done something but didn't do something because he or she or his or her organization was benefiting, or because it was friends that were involved and therefore action was not taken? We have to keep our minds quite open for that. So, but I thought I must just mention that at this stage, I'm not aware that there is any evidence to that effect, but once an allegation is made, it is very important that we probe, particularly because the allegations of corruption at PRASA went on for many years without one seeing any, without one seeing the levels going down. And of course, the evidence that you have given, Mr. Molefe, is very clear that when your board sought to deal with this issue of corruption, I think your evidence says we were attacked. We were attacked. We did not get support from quarters where we expected we would get support. We were being attacked. We were being attacked for doing the right thing. And ultimately, we were kicked out. And, well, other people will come and give evidence, and we want to know what they have to say about this, because indeed, if this is what happened, it's terrible. But they must come give evidence and say whether they deny what you are saying. But in the end, if when I make my findings, I find that this is what happened, you are right. It is terrible. It's something very serious. Okay, thank you. You want to say something?
Maybe, Council, if it exists anywhere in the document, would refer me to that. But I agree with Council that the meeting takes place against the backdrop of investigations that were demonstrating that Sifambo was tainted. And that is detailed in how the process was undertaken, the role of Mr. Mtimkulu in designing the RFPs in a manner that favors a particular party, changes from what was originally supposed to be a lease arrangement to becoming now a lease and outright purchase, but only that done by Sifambo. So that is quite clear. I have no recollection of my evidence stating categorically that the ANC received money. Whether it is in my founding affidavit in that matter or in public statements that I made, every time I spoke about it was in the context of what Mr. Mashaba said to us. So in fairness to the ANC, I don't have evidence that says you got that money.
Yes, yes. No, that is what I was also emphasizing, that at this stage, I'm not aware of any evidence that the ANC got money from Sifambo. I've only had evidence of what you say Mr. Mashaba told you about what Ms. Gomez said. So that's how far it goes. But I was simply saying, you know, one needs to have a look. One needs to probe. We have got to do the job that we have been asked to do properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Ms. Molefe, you are quite right. You've never said that you have the proof. You've merely said that these were the reports you received, and that one must accept.
That is correct.
But I just want to make this point, though. If we go to paragraph 72 of the response to your replying affidavit, Mr. Mashaba, then
what page?
Sorry, at page 329.
Yes, okay, paragraph 72.
Yes. So he says, at the end of paragraph 71, he says, to my knowledge, no donations were made by Swifambo to the ANC. That's the point he makes.
That is correct.
And if you look at his affidavit as a whole, and you see that's the constant theme, that yes, I made the payments, I received the payments on behalf of Swifambo, I made payments through my own company. That's the thrust of Mr. Mashaba's evidence.
That is correct.
Yes. And that is all we have to go on. And we must accept that, as the chairperson has so clearly pointed out, that is the only link we have. His statement to you that I received payments on behalf of Swifambo, and I was asked to make those payments to Ms. Gomez, who would then distribute it to the movement. I don't know whether or not she did so.
That's correct, Chairperson.
But what is significant at paragraph 72, in the middle he says, Mr. Mashaba says, I made the payments set out in annexures RA 15, 17, 20, 21, and 22. Those are the payments referred to in the payment schedule that you were given. You remember yesterday?
That is correct,
Chairperson. So the only question, as the chairperson has pointed out, is can those payments be linked to the ANC? That is the issue. Would that be correct?
Well, the payment can only be linked to the ANC to the extent that, according to Mr. Mashaba, Ms. Gomez presents herself as a fundraiser for the ANC.
Yes, yes, that is correct. Then at paragraph 73 under that, he says, I gave the annexures to Mr. Mamabolo to show that I supported the ANC as requested during the meeting by Mr. Molefe. What is your reaction to that?
That is not true. It had nothing to do with whether we wanted to prove payments to the ANC. The documents were requested for him to demonstrate that when he says he paid money to Similex of Ms. Maria Gomez and the trust that was held by Knowles, that law firm, and Mr. Sabelo, Nkosi Sabelo, that in fact those payments were effected. That's what the evidence was supposed to prove for us. Because I've already said that I never asked him whether he was supporting the ANC or not.
Excuse me. As I understand your evidence, and you must just tell me if I misunderstand, the meeting was called by Mr. Mashaba.
That is correct.
That's point one. Point two, the meeting was called by Mr. Mashaba in connection with the investigation that the investigations that PRASA was conducting. That's number two. Is that right? The meeting had a link.
Was triggered by the investigation.
Yes, his request for a meeting
Yes, Chairperson.
had something to do with the investigations that PRASA was conducting.
That is correct.
Am I correct in also saying that in particular, this request was connected with the investigation that PRASA was conducting that affected Swivambo?
That is correct.
That was correct. And at the meeting, he requests you to, he requests that his assets should not be touched as a result of this investigation. Is that right?
That is correct.
And he, since he is the one who requested the meeting, obviously he's the one who was going to tell you why he wanted the meeting.
That is correct.
And he tells you why he wanted the meeting. And he says he's fearing that as a result of the investigations that relate to Swivambo, he fears that his assets might be in danger of being taken away. As far as you know, he himself had no business that he was doing with PRASA in his personal capacity or through any company other than that he was chairperson of Swivambo.
That is correct.
So the whole meeting was really about how the investigation of PRASA relating to Swivambo was affecting him or could affect him.
Because he was the chairman.
Because he was the
Swivambo.
chairman, yes. Yes, no, thank you.
And he had been asked to be chairperson by somebody else. Who was that person?
That person was the person who asked Mr. Mashaba to be the chairperson of Swivambo was the founder of Swivambo, Mr. Mabunda Makenza.
Makenza Mabunda.
Yeah, Makenza Mabunda. Yeah.
And what company was he associated with, Mr. Mabunda?
Mr. Mabunda was associated with Swivambo he was with what was called the S group, which had a lot of subsidiaries under it, a consulting, engineering consulting firm, a general consulting business, and then of course the other one was called Sifambo Rails, and then I think that's the one that was supposed to then deal with the procurement of locomotives.
Now, the S group is short for what company, or what group of companies?
The S group is short for Sifambo group of companies.
The evidence elsewhere is the S group is short for Siaya.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There is a CIA also that he is involved in. It's also a consulting business.
Then finally, can I refer you to paragraph 79 of Mr. Mashaba's response, which appears at page 331, where in response to paragraph 9.13 of your replying affidavit, he says the contents of these are admitted, save that he didn't provide certain documents. But can I ask us to go back to paragraph 9.13, which is at page 264, and you'll see that's where you list the documents that were contained in the envelope given to Mr. Mamabolo. Page 264, Mr.
Yes, Chairperson, I found the page.
Now, just so that there is no dispute about that, do you confirm that the envelope that Mr. Mamabolo gave you contained these documents as you list them?
I confirm that, Chairperson. There's no other place where I could have gotten documents of Mr. Mashaba outside what he sent to us in an envelope.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sonny, I didn't go to the page 200 and...
Oh, sorry, page 264.
264.
That's the page on which we finished yesterday.
I wonder whether these documents that were in the envelope are very important. I wonder whether we've placed them on record, apart from simply saying documents listed in page 26. I'm looking at 264.
No, sure.
Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Maybe we should just
It
place on record exactly what the
each of the
documents were
yes.
that were in the envelope. Yeah.
As you please, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, at paragraph 9.13.1, the first document you say that was in the envelope was RA 15, and that appears at page 283.
He might not need to go to each one if
Yeah,
he knows.
I could identify
Yeah,
it.
if he knows he has checked already, he can just confirm.
I confirm,
Yes,
Chairperson.
yes.
And this
Okay.
is the document that we referred to yesterday. This is the schedule of payments.
That is correct, Chairperson.
The next document is the one at RA 16, which is at page 284, and that is an exchange of emails between Mr. Mashaba and Mr. Sabelo.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And then the next one is 217, which is a letter written by Mr. Mashaba to his bank asking them to facilitate a payment to Knowles Hussein for 10,400,000 rand.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And you've checked that?
I've checked it.
Yes. And the next one, the next document you refer to is RA 18, which is, and this is a document we went through yesterday, the first invoice that Similex sends to Mr. Mashaba.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And then RA 19 is the second invoice. Remember?
I confirm.
And RA 20 is the payment authorization letter to the bank again by Mr. Mashaba for a payment to be made to Nodes Hussein.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And RA 21 is a similar document, but in relation to a different payment to Nodes Hussein for 14,500,000.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And RA 22 is the payment notification sent by Absa Bank to Mr. Mashaba's company.
Correct,
This is the payment
Chairperson.
for 9,400,000.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And then RA 23 is emails between Mr. Mashaba and Ms. Gomez.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And in these, she just refers to the invoices we've talked about.
That is correct.
Now, just finally, in relation to your evidence relating to what Mr. Mashaba told you, this replying affidavit and the documents attached to you, just want to confirm that you do confirm that what is set out in the replying affidavit is correctly records what happened at the time.
I do confirm that, Chairperson, that the contents of the affidavit confirms what happened at the time.
Mr. Chairperson, may I make this point, Chairperson? And you have raised an important issue.
Please raise your voice.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You have raised an important issue, but I'd intended bringing it up. Clearly, what one needs now is the evidence of Mr. Mashaba and the evidence of Ms. Gomez, and to the extent necessary, Mr. Mamabolo. So those are the witnesses whom we will, well, Mr. Mamabolo, perhaps an affidavit just to confirm the correctness of this, but perhaps to call him, depending on Mr. Mashaba's response and Ms. Gomez's response.
Yes.
But Mr. Mashaba and Ms. Gomez, we will obviously have to get them to respond to Mr. Molefe's affidavit and evidence.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, that needs to be done.
Now, just finally on this issue, again, we're talking about state of minds, Mr. Molefe. When you were told this by Mr. Mashaba, and remember you are a member of the ANC, I suppose you still are, but that's not, but certainly at that stage, because he says you were both members. What was your reaction to how PRASA was awarding tenders, if that allegation was correct?
I think Council should rephrase the question, Chairperson, because Council says how PRASA was awarded tenders. I think Council wanted to say something else.
Yes, I'm afraid I also didn't pay attention because I was reading something here. Do you want to?
Yes.
It should be maybe Sufambo was awarded tender
Yes.
or, generally.
Obviously, I should
Yes.
particularize it in regard to this particular tender. No, you're quite right, Mr. Molefe.
Well, maybe just articulate the question,
Yes.
whether it's the same question or an amended one, just so that one understands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Mashaba Swifambo had been awarded a tender for more than 2.5 billion rand. Is that correct?
That was correct, Chairperson.
You look at the tender documents and the process, and you find that Dr. Mtunkulu, as he called himself, had tailor-made the contract to suit Swifambo. That was your evidence, and that was the finding of the Supreme Court of Appeal and the High Court.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now you then are told by Mr. Mashaba, but there is this added dimension, and he mentions money being paid to the movement. And I'm not saying he proves it, but that's what he tells you. What was your reaction to that?
I understood Mr. Molefe to say his reaction was of being concerned, but bearing in mind that there was no proof, he was just getting this allegation. Is my understanding correct?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Yes.
But one can take it a step further and say
Yes.
that it raises the question as to whether, as to the extent to which the tender process itself might have been influenced by parties that Mr. Mashaba alleges that Ms. Gomez says she was raising the funds for.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, when you met the top six, was this one of the matters you raised with the ANC Top Six?
I think
Maybe
we
let me
should refresh.
Let me start with an
Go
earlier
back.
question. When you met with Mr. Mashaba, had you already met with the top six, or did that meeting with the top six happen later?
When I
Or
met
earlier.
I met with Mr. Mashaba,
Yes.
the meeting with the top six had already happened.
Okay. Yeah. That's.
But the meeting with the top six chairperson would have dealt broadly with the investigations and what was emerging. And the Sefombo matter was the biggest, was key in what was emerging as big irregularities. Another one was the what I refer to as the Bramfontein depot modernization and the procurement of rails and turnouts as part of the preparations for the trains that were to be coming from Brazil. There would have been many other smaller matters that were emerging, like a bit of Siangena and so on, because there were others, Siaya,
Yes.
and so on.
Yes.
Siaya DB would have also been involved in that Braamfontein Depot transactional advisory services,
Yes, yes,
designs of how the depot should look like.
Yes. So the thrust of what you are saying about your meeting with the top six is that you spoke to them and told them in general about what was emerging from the investigations that your board was conducting at PRASA, but you specifically mentioned certain important contracts, including the Swivambo, because it was the biggest, as I understand. You specifically mentioned it, and you would have mentioned many others.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Now, when you filed, or when the replying affidavit about what Mr. Mashaba had told you was lodged in court, it would have become a public document. Would that be correct?
Yes, Chairperson, it would have become a public document.
So people generally would have known that such an allegation had been made.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Were you contacted by anybody from the ANC about that allegation?
I was not contacted by anyone from the ANC. I recall this matter being raised pertinently by the gentleman who later became the Minister of Transport, Mr. Maswanganyi, saying that, I have accused the ANC of receiving monies from Swivambo, and that I didn't even produce evidence to prove that. They didn't know why I mentioned this matter. But nobody from the headquarters of the ANC raised an issue with me.
When Mr. Maswanganyi made this accusation or said this to you, was he saying it as a member of a committee in Parliament? I think yesterday you mentioned that.
Chairperson, he was saying it in his capacity as a member of the Portfolio Committee on Transport.
Oh, okay, all right. I take it you would have explained to him that you were simply making reference to a report that was made to you. You were not making the accusation yourself about the ANC receiving the money.
That is correct, Chairperson. And as Council correctly points out, that allegation was published in the media as a result of the court papers, my replying affidavit, which was in court. It was not like I went to the media just to release a media statement.
And did you at any stage communicate this to any other person in the ANC except through the court papers? The allegation that Mr. Mashaba had made to you.
Let's start off by saying my minister was a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. My minister was receiving regular reports on this investigation, and we referred to those reports yesterday in the context of my reply to the minister's letter where she was asking us to close off the investigation, and that letter is dated the 24th of August. 24th of August, 2016. So a member of the executive committee who reports to the president and the cabinet, who also sat on the subcommittees of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, was privy to all of these investigations. And I did say yesterday, well, it looks like it was much later, in 2017, detailed letters had been written to various institutions in Parliament. But at that time also, it was public knowledge that we had reported a series of cases to the Hawks for further investigation in terms of PRECA.
So, on that note, can I ask you to go back to your affidavit, which is bundle D, and turn to the point at which we left off yesterday, which is page 28, paragraph 113.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sonia and Mr. Molefe. You'll come back to this question. I just want to ask something else. You can look at the page later. You have just mentioned that your minister, and I think you were referring to Mr. Masongai, he was the minister at the relevant time, when you said your minister was member of the cabinet, member of the NEC, is that right?
I'm referring to Minister Dipuo Peters.
Oh, Minister Dipuo Peters.
Because at the time when we dealt with the Mashaba matter, that reply affidavit, and
she was still
the application on Siangena, she was still the minister.
Okay, all right. Now, it seems obviously every minister is supposed to report to the president about what's going on in their departments, so that the president can see whether the department is doing well or not, and whether that particular minister is doing well or not. Because if the minister is not doing well, or if the minister is not up to the challenges of the department, then the president should consider whether to shift the minister elsewhere, or remove her or him and get somebody else who is up to the challenges of the department. So the president would be receiving reports from each minister, is supposed to receive reports from every minister and probe whether the work is being done properly. And I would imagine that also, apart from every minister reporting to the president, I would imagine that the cabinet has occasion to hear what every minister, how every minister is doing, what are the challenges they are facing in their departments, and to see what decisions as cabinet can be taken. But then if a minister is also a member of the NEC, of the governing party, one would expect that, since the governing party talks about deploying its cadres in government and elsewhere, one would imagine that the governing party also keeps an eye on how its deployees perform, because it should have an interest in them doing their job quite well. Because if they do their job quite well, and the populace thinks that its deployees are doing a good job, the chances of getting re-elected next time are greater than if they mess up in various departments. Now, you have been in government, certainly I remember at provincial level. You are a senior member of the ANC. Do you know whether what I'm talking about does happen?
That is correct, Chairperson. It happens. And when I was in the province, I was also a member of the National Executive Committee. So I was both the chairperson of the ANC in the province and a member of the National Executive Committee. But in addition to all of that, we had what was called the President's Coordinating Council, where the President would meet with all the premiers of the provinces, members of the cabinet, to do a review of the performance of government on strategic priorities that would have been identified in their strategic plans. So there was that regular report. Of course, in addition to that, there would have been what was called, I think it was called the Budget Council or Forum, where premiers and MECs of finance with ministers and the president would meet before the final budget was appropriated, and informed in those discussions by the report of the Finance and Fiscal Commission, which was to ensure equitable allocation of resources throughout the country.
Thank you. I feel that it is cold.
It suddenly has got cold, Chairperson. It suddenly has got cold. It was a little warmer some time ago.
I don't know. I think the heater here is not very good, because even yesterday when it got better, it was only slightly warm. I don't think it went beyond that. But most of the time it seemed to make certainly me cold, quite cold. I don't know what can or can't be done. I don't see Stemela here. Maybe somebody's listening. If there is anything that can still be done to make the heater more effective, please, somebody should follow that up.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You had asked a question and I interrupted you. I see that we are at 15:15.
It would be the ideal time to take.
If it's convenient, we can take the tea break now then.
Yes.
Okay, let's take the tea break. We'll come back at 11:30.
As you please.
We adjourn. we may proceed. Your mic.
Sorry, Chairperson. May I point out that I did raise the question of the fact
heater.
that the room is cold.
Yes.
Informed that the air conditioning is controlled centrally.
Yes.
But they are attending to it.
Yes, okay, all right.
Chairperson, I know I'd indicated that I was going to turn to another topic, but there is something that I omitted to raise with Mr. Molefe. May I, with your leave, raise it in relation to his replying affidavit in this Wafambo matter?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Molefe, can I ask you to turn to Bundle D, page 268. That's SA6, page 268. Now, we've dealt with the documents that Mr. Mashaba gave to Mr. Mamabola. But in addition to those documents, you refer to a series of, or an exchange of emails between Mr. Montana and Ms. Gomez. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, firstly, you raised two issues. You set out the exchange between them at RA 30, which is at page 323. Can I ask you to look at page 323? Yeah.
Is it 13?
323, RA 30.
R8.
RA 30, replying affidavit, annexure 30.
I'm looking at the right documents. Are we in bundle A?
Bundle D.
Bundle D is the one we have been using this morning.
Bundle D, yeah.
320.
Page 323, yeah? Mr. Soni.
323, yes. Sorry, Chairperson, yes. Now, sorry, can I just ask you to identify what these documents are?
RA 330, Chairperson.
RA 30.
RA 30.
Yes.
Firstly, it's an email sent from Maria Gomez on the 17th of December 2013.
And to whom is it addressed?
Addressed to Mr. Lucky Montana, Prasa Cop.
Yes. Okay, if you just go to the document at the bottom of that, what is that document? Or in the second half of that page?
The document at the bottom is an email from Mr. Lucky Montana and it is addressed to Comrade Sonia.
Well, it's Maria Gomez, am I right?
It's addressed to Maria Gomez, but it also says, Dear Comrade Sonia.
And what is the date of that?
The date of that document is 16th December 2013.
Yes. So, and the document from, the email from Ms. Gomez is the 17th of December, is that correct?
That is correct.
So can we look at the document at the bottom, the email of the 16th? Mr. Chairperson, I submit it as an important document, and I would ask the witness to read it into the record.
Yes, no, that's fine. And I see the sequence is that the one at the bottom is 16 December, the one at the top
Is the
is
17th?
17
Yes.
December. Okay, all right.
So I just want to ask you, in regard to the email from Mr. Montana to Ms. Gomez, what is the subject matter?
The subject matter, Chairperson, of the email of Mr. Montana to Ms. Gomez is the capital projects that PRASA will undertake. I don't know if I have to read
No.
the email. Quite, running into
I'm sorry,
brilliant.
Mr. Molefe. I think what council is asking for what appears at the top where it says from T. Montana and his email address to Maria Gomez and the email address. Then there is then it says subject. I think that's what he's asking about when he says what was the subject of that email.
Oh, the subject of the email.
He notes, yeah.
Summary, it says summary notes.
Yes.
And it is,
Well, the importance of that you will see when you read Ms. Gomez's. But I just want to point out that the subject is, according to the email, summary notes. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Now, can you then read the email, please?
The one by Mr. Montana.
Yes.
It says, Dear Comrade Sonia, as discussed, please note as follow. Moloto Rail Corridor. This project is about the introduction of multimodal transport system to serve as a catalyst for economic development in the western region of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and Gauteng. It also involves 3 municipalities, which include Ekangala, Sekhukhune, and Tshwane Metropolitan. The rail line is approximately 113 kilometers with estimated cost of 12 billion rand. The cost to be revised once the review is complete. That is in brackets. The project is currently undergoing an option analysis phase, with the project review expected to be completed by March 2014. Then he goes on, he says Johannesburg, Durban high-speed rail. This project is about introducing a high-speed train service between Johannesburg and Durban. The project is currently being conceptualized with the detailed feasibility study expected to be undertaken in 2013-2014 financial year. Detailed options analysis will be undertaken to assess the viability of a separate passenger rail service for a combination of freight and passenger rail services. It then goes on to say Park Station. This is the largest railway station in South Africa, situated in Johannesburg. with over 200,000 commuters connecting through the station daily. It is, however, anticipated that the commuter numbers will reach 260,000 by 2020. It is planned that a full decking of the station will be undertaken in order to create more space for commercial use. In the medium term, PRASA will invest approximately 1 billion as part of phase 1 of the project, which mainly focuses on creating additional commercial space on the lower part of the station. The fourth project is Pretoria Station. It says similar to Park Station in terms of the planned works. The project is currently being conceptualized for future development. Approximately 130,000 passengers, commuters, connect through the stations daily. Hope this will be of assistance to you and the team from DBA.
Yes. Can I ask you, do you know who DBA is?
Well, I'm not sure. This may well mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Let me not hazard an answer. I'm not sure which is DBA referred to.
What the abbreviation stands for.
Yeah.
You don't know what the abbreviation that he used stands for. Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's what you mean. You mean that you don't know what this
abbreviation stands for.
Yes, okay.
All right, can we then read the email of the 17th of December 2017?
Before we do that,
Yes.
I notice, and I just want to confirm whether you notice the same thing, Mr. Molefe, that in this email that you have just read, the author tells Ms. Maria Gomez, or Comrade Sonia as he calls the person concerned, he tells her about projects that PRASA was undertaking or was planning to undertake, what they entailed, at least in regard to two. He also tells her what monetary value would be attached to them. The first one, he says, the estimated cost of the project is about 12 billion rand.
That is correct.
The other one that he tells, that is in paragraph 3, he says, would be approximately 1 billion rand. And of course, later he says, I hope that this will be of assistance to you and the team from DBA. That's part of what he's telling the person about, the projects and in some cases, the costs involved. Is that what you notice as well?
I've noticed that,
Yes.
Chairperson.
Yes, okay, thank you.
As you please, I want to come back to that issue as he sets it out as Mr. Molefe sets it out in his reply.
Okay, okay.
Now, what is the subject matter again in relation to Ms. Gomez's email?
The subject matter in Ms. Gomez's email, Chairperson, is summary notes.
So
We just, for the sake of completeness, mention again for the record that that is the email that appears at page at page 323 of bundle D, that is marked RA 30 that is marked RA 30, and it's an email from Maria Gomez to Mr. Lucky Montana, dated 17 December 2013 at 12:25. And you have just confirmed that the subject matter is summary notes. The subject matter is the same as the subject matter of the email that came from Mr. Montana to Maria Gomez. Is that right?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Soni.
As you please, Chairperson. Could you read the whole email, including the manner in which Ms. Gomez addresses Mr. Montana?
May Council repeat the question?
I say, could you read the whole email from Ms. Gomez to Mr. Montana, including the manner in which she addresses Mr. Montana?
The email reads as follows, Chairperson. Dear Comrade Happy, I am sorry to come back to you only today, but yesterday dinner finished too late. But otherwise, how are you feeling now? Hope much better. However, it was a good help for the part of our conversations related to railways issue. Now, today, I will have a meeting with Vice President of the bank to go to some more details of how and what we would like to go forward. The meeting will be in Sandton at 4 p.m. in our office. So if you feel you can come and participate, will be most than welcome. Otherwise, I will see you later because our man is completely desperate. So please, with regards, SG, which I think is Sonia Gomez.
Now, just putting the two emails in context, would it be fair to say that Ms. Gomez's email is a response to Mr. Montana's email of the 16th?
That is correct, Chairperson.
I'm sorry, Mr. Soni. The salutation in the email from Ms. Maria Gomez to Mr. Montana is Dear Comrade Happy. Do you know that name as one of the names for Mr. Montana, or is it a name that you don't know? I don't know whether it's I'm taking it that it's a name. So, but I don't know. Is that something that you associate with him or not?
Where I am sitting now, I'm not certain, but it is very clear that it is a response to the discussion they have, and the notes that appear in the email of Mr. Montana to Ms. Gomez, dated the 16th of December, 2013.
So I guess what you are saying is, I don't know about it, Comrade Happy, but when I look at the two emails, it's clear to me that the one is a response to the other.
That is so, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Now, in your replying affidavit at page 268, you deal with, or you comment on this exchange of emails at page 268, paragraph 9.15.10. Can I ask you to read into the record what you said in paragraph 9.15.10 of your replying affidavit?
The paragraph 9:15.10 of my replying affidavit reads as follows. The first alarming feature of this correspondence is the familiarity between Ms. Gomez and Mr. Montana. For instance, they refer to each other as comrades. The second alarming feature is that Mr. Montana sends Ms. Gomez details of various projects within PRASA. Mr. Montana had no business sending such information to Ms. Gomez. Similex is not a tenderer, supplier, or contractor to PRASA. Ms. Gomez, to the best of my knowledge, is not involved in any entity supplying services to PRASA.
And of course, the third point that Molefe.
My recollection, Chairperson, is that the set of emails was found in the course of the investigations by the investigators.
And by the time it was found, Mr. Montana had left, so...
He had
was not
already
contracted.
left, and a lot of work had to be done imaging the laptops and computers.
Chairperson,
Are you about to move to
thought
something
I
else?
just wanted to place that on.
Looking at that, is that part of what he told you at the meeting that you had with him and other people, that he was instructed?
He said that he was requested.
He was requested, yes. Okay. Well, I'm just wondering what relationship he would have with her for her to instruct him to make payments to her entities. But obviously you can't help with that because he did not use that terminology in the meeting.
Yes, Chairperson, I don't know how she would then instruct somebody who's not her subordinate in the same business. It's probably just the use of language.
Yeah, maybe it's just the use of language. Well, I hope Mr. Mashaba will come here and then he can explain.
Yes. Can I raise one issue related to that,
Yes.
Chairperson? Mr. Molefe, can I take you to page 263 of Bundle D, and in particular paragraph 9.11. This is still part of your replying affidavit. Are you there?
And what is the paragraph?
Paragraph 9.11, page 263.
I'm looking at it.
Okay. Will you read it into the record, please? It relates to the issue about the instructions.
Mr. Mashaba explained further that Mr. Mabunda had instructed him to pay some of the money received from PRASA into specified accounts without Mr. Mashaba knowing who was being paid or the reasons for the payment. Mr. Mashaba was insistent that he did not know the identity of the beneficiaries, and he was merely informed that the money would benefit the movement.
So that is the difference between the two.
Yes, I'm trying to look for Mr. Mashaba's affidavit because maybe it might be helpful
Yes.
for me to, maybe I'll be able to catch.
Just try and find the passage.
I think it's at 3.2 something.
I think it's at 329, paragraph 72, Chairperson.
Yes. Move on, but I think I did see where he seems to say he made these payments effectively, where he says effectively that he made these payments on the instructions of Ms. Gomez. But that's okay, I can check that later.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Ms. Molefe, just before tea, you had indicated that you had approached the different law enforcement authorities.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sonia.
Sorry.
I'm terribly sorry. I've
I'm
just
sorry.
picked up something that links to those two, which may link, not links, but may link to the two emails exchanged between Ms. Gomez and Mr. Montana. So I just mentioned, I see that in paragraph 910 at page 263, I think that is no, I'm sorry. That is Mr. Mulefe's replying affidavit.
Yes.
But he says, that is Mr. Mulefe speaking now in his affidavit, Mr. Mashaba explained that he met with Ms. Gomez. Ms. Gomez told Mr. Mashaba that she wanted money for the movement.
Yes.
Mr. Gomez also told him that she knew the bid to supply locomotives to PRASA was worth billions, and she could not understand why 10% of the value of the bid could not be paid to the African National Congress.
Yes. Yes.
So I don't know whether it's connected with these emails, but we saw from the emails that Mr. Montana, according to the email, was telling Ms. Gomez about projects that PRASA was undertaking or was going to be undertaking, and telling her even the costs involved, the value, monetary value of those projects. And here you are saying what Mr. Mashaba told you, and you are saying he said he met with Ms. Gomez, and he said Ms. Gomez told him, that is Mashaba, that she wanted money for the movement, and Ms. Gomez, Mr. Mashaba told you that Ms. Gomez also told him that she knew the bid to supply locomotives to PRASA was worth billions, and she could not understand why 10% of the value of the bid could not be paid to the African National Congress. You don't need to comment. You may comment if you want to. I was just saying maybe there is a connection between how Ms. Gomez gets to know information that maybe should only be known at a certain time only by people within PRASA. That's what I was saying, that it may be that there is that link, but it might not be that it links to this particular one. Okay. But as I say, you don't have to comment on it, but if you want to say something, I'm not preventing you from saying something.
No, I would rather not comment,
Yes,
Chairperson,
yeah.
because I don't know where it would stop.
No,
Safe to say that
yes.
there seemed to be the probability of the link between the emails
Yes.
and what appears in this response that
Yes.
the person gets given the values, projects and their values well in advance, and the person says, probably that's what they had agreed with Mr. Montana, that I must get 10%, or the movement must get 10%, as she is putting it,
Yes,
of
yes.
each one of those projects.
Yes, yes. No, thank you.
Mr. Molefe, can I then go to page 28, 113 of your main affidavit? Page 28, paragraph 113.
Is that bundle D?
The same bundle, yes.
This one?
Yes. Page 28, paragraph 113. Are you there?
I am there, Chairperson.
Chairperson, I just wondered, in the interest of time, because I'm also considering how to deal with this complaint beyond merely recording it as a complaint, because we know from what's contained in the affidavit that, and in the answering affidavit of the police, that there's no answer for why they've delayed up to now. And I wondered whether it may not be an idea to get Mr. Molefe to confirm the correctness of this, and then get the new head of the police inspectorate to come and explain why nothing has been done now. It's just in the interest of saving time.
Yes. Well, this is a non-action by law enforcement agencies.
Yes.
Well, it shouldn't take long for him to just say, bang, bang, bang.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, yeah.
So in these, in paragraphs 113, 114, and 115 of page 29, you set out the approaches you made to the police. Would that be correct, Mr. Montana?
I do, Chairperson.
And at page paragraph 113, you refer to a letter that you wrote to the law enforcement authorities, including the head of the NDPP at that time.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And the head of the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And that letter appears at page 192. We don't need to go to it, but I'm just asking you to confirm that that is the letter you in fact wrote to the different persons.
I do confirm that I wrote that letter, and I've seen it several times before I appeared here.
Yes. Can I just ask if in about 2 or 3 sentences you can summarize what you said in that letter? Well, no, not 2 or 3 sentences, but as summarized as possible.
The essence of the letter, Chairperson, was a complaint about the fact that nothing had done about the cases reported to the DPCI relating to what we consider to be very serious violations of the law or criminal activities. And the fact that we had registered several of these cases, I think elsewhere, probably in the founding affidavit in the previous, in my letter to the minister and previous affidavit, most likely we tabled some 69 cases that we had reported. So we were concerned that there was no movement.
And did you ask for, sorry.
And of course, my view was that, and the view of the board was that it was improper for what was the organ of state charged with the responsibility of investigating crimes, offenses, and prosecuting, laying a basis for prosecution in that regard.
And can I ask you just the extent of the details you gave in that letter? If you look at page 197, paragraph 11.4, you point out that you were annexing to the complaint the founding affidavits in the Siangena and the Swifambo matters. At page 197.
100 and?
Page 197, paragraph 11.4.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Right. And then on the next page, page 198, you set out the formal request for assistance. If you look at paragraphs 14, 15, and 16, you point out why the police and the NDPP are required to look into these matters on account of the legislation dealing with corruption.
Yes, it is so, Chairperson.
Mr. Molefe.
But it relates to, we're dealing with where we talk about cooperative governance. The Constitution obliges organs of state to support one another, to collaborate in dealing with the problems, and to the extent possible, avoid unnecessary litigation. Litigations to be dealt with as last resort.
Must have been frustrating to you and the board to have a situation where you had to even remind law enforcement agencies about what the Constitution says about their responsibilities to try and get them to do their job. It must have been frustrating to have to approach so many entities or institutions and functionaries without really getting support for your fight against corruption. Because yesterday you told us about writing to the minister and Minister Masango Sangai not getting the support, writing to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Transport in Parliament, not even getting acknowledgement of receipt of your letter, writing to the Speaker of Parliament, raising these very important issues, not even getting acknowledgement of receipt of your letter, writing to the Hogs, laying complaints with the SAPS and the Hogs, expecting them to do their job, but them not doing their job, then having to go to court to try and get them to do their job. It must have been quite draining. And
it was certainly frustrating. It was inexplicable the way it was dealt with. And again, these matters became public knowledge. The question that one might ask, and bearing in mind that political interference is undesirable, but certainly the Minister of Justice, under whom such, and the Minister of Police, under whom these organs resort, should have been able to say, look, we see in the public domain and in the reports that are given to our Minister of Transport that there are these cases that have been lodged with you. Give us a status report. These are very serious matters. What are we going to do about them? They involve monies that could easily disappear, which would continue to be used against the taxpayers' interests. So it's a question that begs for answers, indeed.
And it may well be that to the extent that it is said that state capture involved or entailed paralyzing certain institutions so that they don't do their job properly, that they are supposed to do. It may well be that what happened with your board trying to get assistance might well and not getting it, and institutions not doing their job. It may well be that it's a manifestation of that kind of paralysis.
It is so, Chairperson. The backdrop to the point that is made by the Chairperson is that there was the head of the DPCI, or the Hawks, who appeared to be effective and committed to discharging his responsibility, Mr. Anwar Dramat. He was removed unceremoniously on spurious allegations, which never were seriously tested in a proper court of law. And that is when Mr. Ntlemeza was appointed in his place. Our experience with this case, and I'll try to be very brief, Chairperson, also, is that there were quite a number of professional police officers in the police services, the DPCI in particular. But every time those professional officers put their teeth on the cases, they would be removed and cronies would be appointed in their place, clearly with the instruction to do nothing, and there was no movement after that. Several of them became casualties. And I think one of those who became casualties would have been, but though relating to a different case, would have been Major General Colonel Brigadier Sibia, something like that, who later became head of the forensic unit in the city, metropolitan city of Johannesburg. So there was a deliberate crippling of the system, and what was happening in the police services was also happening in the NPA.
And I guess that from the point of view of anyone who may have been pursuing state capture and who may have been pursuing the agenda of benefiting from corruption, it would make sense to make sure that the law enforcement agencies would not do their job, even if evidence relating to them, evidence of crime relating to them would be placed before them. Because whatever they did, if they knew the law enforcement agencies would do their job properly, the chances that would be that they would be caught and then would be brought to book. And so the idea of paralyzing the law enforcement agencies seems to be something that they would really have, that would have benefited them.
It is so, Chairperson. Maybe at some point we must get someone to present to this commission what exactly happened in the interaction between PRASA and the DPCI in particular. The DPCI, I attended a couple of meetings with them, in particular with a gentleman, I think is called Major General Kana, who was the deputy to Mr. Ntlemeza. When we started, and we do indicate in some of our documents that they said they were going to prioritize the Sifambo and Siangena matter. When we started, he said that he needed, they didn't have forensic capacity to investigate. We agreed with them that the capacity that we had in the PRASA investigation would be given to them with full control of those forensic investigators, that they didn't even need to give, those investigators didn't need to give reports to PRASA, because once they are under the police, DPCI, they should account to them, even though PRASA was paying the bill for that. Several reports, many Arch-Liver files, liver arch files, were made available as a result of that investigation. They did not want to touch them because dealing with them would have meant they have to follow the people implicated in those things. I think at some point, Chairperson, as Council correctly pointed out earlier on, they must be called to explain.
Yes, no, they will be called. There is a, we call them work streams. There is a work stream within the commission, which consists of members of the legal team as well as investigators, that is focusing on law enforcement agencies. And included in the law enforcement agencies is the Hawks, to say to what extent did they not do their job as part of this paralysis that we're talking about. And I know that there have been consultations with senior people within the Hawks. So it is in the plan that at some stage we are going to look at those things. What What I think the investigators, what I'm not sure about, is whether they may have appreciated the particular special place that the PRASA cases must occupy in that investigation, namely the PRASA case, the cases that PRASA placed before the SAPS, placed before the Hawks and said investigate and what happened. So, but the information will be shared with them, but they are certainly looking at how, for example, the Hawks operated, to what extent were they paralyzed, who was responsible for that, how did that come about? Same thing with the NPA and so on.
Chairperson, maybe I should make the last point on
Yeah.
that, if allowed. Lest I get misunderstood, I need to credit the new leadership of the DPCI. I think they are busy rebuilding that institution. I think General Bibea and quite a couple of other officers there with whom I had met and who are now back very professionally attending to these cases show a commitment that a professional law enforcement officer needs to exhibit. So I think we acknowledge the work that they are doing, including what the NPA is doing to fix a broken system.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be like all
Yeah.
these laws, they are doing nothing.
Yes, yes. No, that's fine. I think everyone understands that we certainly are talking about the past, what may have happened during that time, and certainly I think you are right that the new leadership in some of these institutions seem to be committed to fixing the problems that have been there. And I think that is why I think the Commission is getting a lot of cooperation from them, from the leadership. And thank you.
If I could take that issue further, Chairperson, what we will do is we will ask Mr. Molefe outside these proceedings to give us details of any of those interactions so that we could pursue it with the law enforcement work stream. Now, what was the reaction to your request to the DPCI? This is the letter that we were looking at, Mr. Molefe. In other words, did they accede to your request and pursue the matters?
Well, there was a letter that, as I indicated, which said that they were prioritizing certain cases. Maybe we should look for that exhibit and look at what the response is. But up until my term of office ended, there was no progress in this matter. Of course, in the end, Chairperson, we had to institute action in the High Court of the Republic of South Africa to try and compel them to do their job, asking them to explain to the court why is it that they are not doing their job. Of course, their response to that was to raise a technicality that says, which now links what they are doing to what the new minister Mr. Maswanganyi was saying. Say, You don't have the authority to take us to court because your board did not have a quorum when this decision was taken. Of course, I must say it was incorrect because I had a full mandate taken in 2015, which allowed us to investigate and to litigate on the matters arising out of the investigation.
So, because of a lack of response to your request for assistance from the law enforcement authorities, you turned to the courts, is that correct?
That is correct, Chairperson.
I'm going to deal with the judgment in a moment, but effectively the relief you sought was a mandamus, an order that they must do their job as you had set out in your letter of request.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Now, and then you've explained to the chairperson that their response was to take a technicality, a technical point that the court didn't, that the board didn't have the locus standi to bring the application because it wasn't quoted.
That is correct.
Now, I just want to, if the chairperson to take.
I just want to say, of course, it must have been an indictment on the executive that a board of a parastatal, a government entity, had to go to court to get another organ of state to do its job, when actually, if you were getting proper support from the minister responsible for PRASA, once you reported these things to the minister, to say, the police are not doing anything about our cases. We have laid complaints, they are not doing anything. It should have been the minister who speaks to the minister of police and tells the president, the Hawks are not doing their job. And then the Hawks should have been talked to say, why are you not doing your job? And of course, if Parliament was giving you support, Parliament could have called the Hawks to Parliament as well to say, what's going on? Why are you not doing this? Now, to have a situation where taxpayers' money now must be taken to pay lawyers in order to get an organ of state to do its job, when another organ of state is saying, here's a problem, it falls under our jurisdiction, please do your job. It's a very strange situation. But of course, you had nowhere else to go by then. That's why you had to go to court.
That is correct, Chippers. But to the credit of SCOPA, SCOPA did call them.
Yes.
To come and account on what they were doing about these cases.
Yes.
General Tlemeza was there and Major General Kana.
Yeah.
Of course, in their answers, they sounded to have been at 6s and 7s because they were really not. General Tlemeza had just recently been appointed, and they were really not able to give answer properly to those questions. But SCOPA did attempt to get them to address issues, but nothing happened after that.
Yes. They were not called back later on to say, you have just been appointed, maybe you have not familiarized yourself with what has happened. Go back, come back in a month's time, tell us what you have identified has gone wrong and what you are going to do to fix it.
They might have been called, but this particular day, we were together in the same meeting,
Yes, yes.
where, of course, they were disputing what I was reporting as
Yeah.
having been done by PRASA.
Yes.
So without any factual basis for their rejection. I don't know if they were called back
Later on,
later
yes,
and
yeah.
what they said when they went
Yes,
back.
yes.
The reality of the matter is that we're sitting here today.
And
The
not much
There's
was
no
done.
evidence of anything much
Arrests and-
that has been done except what we have taken to the courts as PRASA, the matter of Sipombo, which resulted in the setting aside of that contract, it having been declared invalid.
And if you hadn't taken the matter to court, it looks like nothing would have happened. Nothing would, nobody would have done anything.
It would have been business as usual.
It would have been business as usual.
As you please. Now, the chairperson has said that it is strange that you had to go to court to get the law enforcement authorities, who are other organs of state, to do their job. They took a technical point. I just ask you, Chairperson, I'm going to refer to the judgment because the learned judge, in rejecting the point made by the police that there was no locus standi, raises this issue, and I just would like to place it on record, Chairperson. Now I ask you to turn to page 206 of Bundle D, which is part of the judge, which is page 5 of the judgment of the court.
What page in the bundle?
The judgment starts at page 202, Chairperson.
202.
202.
Yeah.
And paragraph 5 is the passage. But perhaps I should just place on record who the parties are, Chairperson.
Yeah.
At page 202, Mr. Molefe, you will see that this is a case in the Gauteng division of the High Court, and it is case number 36337 of 2017. And the parties are PRASA, who is the applicant, and OUTA, this is the Organization Undoing Tax Abuse, which is an intervening party, and the respondents are the Directorate for Priority Crimes Investigation and the National Prosecuting Authority. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, again, just as background to the judgment, they had taken 2 points. The first point is that you didn't have locus standi, and OUTA ought not to be admitted as an intervening party. Is that what happened?
That was correct.
Now, at paragraph 5, the learned judge just gives a comment about the approach adopted by the respondents, and I'd just like you to read that into the recorder.
The Honorable Judge, at paragraph 5, says, I consider it inimical to the interest of justice that where matters of public interest are concerned, organs of state indulge in costly squabbles of interlocutory and somewhat technical nature rather than engage with the merits of the matter in an expeditious, responsible, and transparent manner.
And in fact, again, just to give it context, they had not filed an answering affidavit in regard to the substance of your complaint as set out in the case. Am I right?
That is correct, Chairperson.
So, at paragraph 14.1 on page 218 of the papers,
I'm sorry, just
Of the
want
judgment?
to.
paragraph 14.1, Chairperson.
I think it's before we go there. They didn't answer the substance of your complaint. They filed an affidavit taking these preliminary points, but the judge went on to deal with the merits in the matter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did they ask to be given an opportunity if their points, preliminary points were dismissed, to be given an opportunity to file an affidavit to answer the substance of the complaint, or is that something you would not remember?
I would not remember because at this stage,
Yes.
I think I had ceased to be the chair of Brussels.
Yes. Oh, okay. Because it is quite strange. Normally, when a party who has been sued takes the kinds of points that they took, they would nevertheless answer the substance of the allegations on the merits, on the basis that if the court dismisses their preliminary points, the court should have their response to the complaint. Now, one wonders whether the reason why there was no response, there was no affidavit containing a response, was that whatever they could say was going to be embarrassing to them. In other words, they didn't have a defense to the allegations on the merits. That's why they didn't put them up.
But yes, Chairperson, my view is that they had no defense because all they could say is that, no, PRASA is wrong. We are, in fact, intending to act on those cases.
Yes.
Then I will address that issue through the judgment, Chairperson. The question of what was to happen to their response to the substance of the charge. Again, at paragraph 14, the learned judge deals with the question of costs. And at 14.1, he again comments on the unacceptable approach adopted by the respondents. Could you read 14.1 into the record?
Chairperson, paragraph 14.1 of the judgment reads as follows, and it relates to the costs. As indicated earlier in this judgment, it is to be deplored that organs of state engage in interlocutory skirmishes with each other whilst the main battle is raging around them, and they, by their conduct, delay any meaningful engagement therein.
And then, if you look at the order itself, you'll see on page 219, Mr. Molefe, in paragraph 15.1.1.2, an order is made as to when the answering affidavit is to be delivered. And you'll see that the learned judge gave them just 5 days to deliver their answering affidavit.
That is correct, Chairperson.
And then I just want to refer to the last paragraph of the judgment and the order. And can you just indicate what the order was? Because it seems to express the learned judge's displeasure at the approach that the respondents had adopted. Paragraph 5 of page 220.
Chairperson, paragraph 5 of page 220, it is paragraph 5 of the judgment, and it relates to the order handed down by the court. It says the DPCI is ordered to pay PRASA's costs of the interlocutory applications, including the costs of the condonation application and PRASA's counter application on the scale as between attorney and client, including the costs of 3 counsels who were employed.
It's an order. It's a very unusual or rare order for a court to make, and it is made when a court strongly disapproves of the conduct of the party against whom the order is made. It says on an attorney and client scale, and it's a cost of 3 counsels. It may be a pity if persons who didn't do their job didn't get to be the ones to pay those costs, because in the end those costs come from the taxpayers if it's the institution that pays. But it's persons who fail to do their job. So, but it reflects how displeased the judge was with the conduct of DPCI. Okay, so I thought I would just mention that it reflects very serious disapproval by the judge of DCPI's conduct in the matter.
That is so, Chairperson.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, you carry on at page 100, paragraph 115 of your affidavit, Mr. Molefe, where you point out that the DPCI then filed their answering affidavit and PRASA filed its its answering affidavit and PRASA filed its replying affidavit, but the matter has not been taken further. And then you make the point, it is clear that the interim boards that were installed simply do not have the determination of the dismissed board to hold those who hold power to account.
Chairperson, I have
Oh, sorry.
lost the page.
That's at page 28.
Page 28. I found it, and that is paragraph.
Paragraph 115, right at the end of the page. So effectively, what you are saying is, we pursued this matter, we got it into court, we got past the technical stage, but nothing has happened since then, and you say this is partly due to the fact that the interim boards that succeeded your board did not pursue the matter with the required enthusiasm and zeal that a public entity or a public board should do.
That is correct, Chairperson.
But you see, Mr. Molefe, this is really very serious. Even when your board had been dismissed, Nobody can say that whoever the different ministers of transport have been after your board had left wouldn't know that there was this litigation that was still pending. If they were really interested in dealing with corruption, and if they were really interested in having the cases that you had sent to the Hawks being properly investigated, and the relevant portfolio committee in Parliament ought to have known that your board had launched an application and had since been dismissed. They ought to have kept an eye on what would the next board do about that litigation. They ought to have, Parliament ought to have asked, where is that litigation now? Why is it not being finalized? They ought to have asked the minister. They ought to have called the interim boards and asked them about these things if they were doing their oversight functions properly. And if there seemed to be too much of a delay, they ought to have been interested to say why. Why are these matters not being finalized? These are old matters. So it's as if, it creates an impression as if any corruption connected with PRASA was not supposed to be investigated. Any criminal cases arising from corruption in PRASA were not supposed to be investigated by the police, were not supposed to be investigated by the Hawks. It creates that impression. And it's very worrying. Some of these things I'm saying, you don't have to say anything, but it's just the impression that one gets to say, you have ministers, you have a government that almost ad nauseam says we are committed to fighting corruption. You have got political parties that almost ad nauseam saying we are committed to fighting corruption. You have got ministers who will say the same thing on public platforms, members of parliament, everybody. But here is a case from PRASA. Here are cases. Here is a board that has been trying to get these cases investigated. But nobody comes up to say, this board has been dismissed, it had reported these cases, let's pursue them. Nobody does that. And if the Hawks don't do anything, nobody does that. The president ought to have been interested to say to the Hawks, how can the board of PRASA have to take you to court to do your job? And when your board is not there, the president is supposed to say to the minister, what's happening? Both the Minister of Police and the Minister of Transport. What's happening about those cases that were reported to the Hawks? Why are people not doing what obviously is what they are supposed to do? Cabinet must be interested in these things. Parliament must be interested in these things. The governing party must be interested in how its own employees perform their job. Are they displaying a fight against corruption that the party says it is committed to? Is that commitment to fighting corruption manifested in how people conduct themselves in performing their job? It's very, very worrying. It's very, very worrying. You may have been doing your job, what you consider to be your job, but it raises a lot of things because it gave an opportunity to various institutions, various functionaries, if they were committed to fighting corruption, to join you, to assist you, and when your board has been dismissed, to take that baton and say, we want to see those cases finalized. And if there are people who are not doing their job, get them fired. Because you are employed to do a particular job. If you can't do it, you mustn't be there. Now, 5 years later, not much has been done about these cases. And then, of course, when you get reports that say certain things about certain connections, you've got to probe and see whether the reason why nothing is being done has got anything to do with who are being mentioned in regard to certain things. It's very concerning. Okay, Mr. Soni. Sometimes I say these things that I say, but you might feel you have to say something, but you don't need to. But I think you want to say something, Mr. Molefe.
No, just 2 points, Chairperson. I think quite clearly from what the Chairperson has said, those who sing that they are fighting corruption but not acting probably think that all that they have to do is to sing a ritual about corruption. That's one point. The second point is that yesterday the Chairperson said that perhaps there's a need to look at the record of discussions of some of these parliamentary committees.
Yes.
My last Minister of Transport, when he was still a member of the PCOT, Portfolio Committee on Transport, was very much opposed to the fact that the PRASA board was taking law enforcement agencies to court to compel them to discharge their responsibilities and obligations to the citizens of this country. Probably if those records are made available, that could be picked up in those discussions. But it shows that there was no willingness to deal with these issues. And that would also perhaps show that we read earlier on projects that Mr. Montana was giving to Ms. Gomez in his notes. And one of those projects is called the Moloto Corridor. The minister, my last Minister of Transport, Mr. Maswanganyi, when he got into office, that was one of the projects that he wanted to see happen, regardless of what National Treasury had said about the viability of that project, because National Treasury had said this is not viable. But it's one of the projects they wanted to happen, because all you needed is to commit capital to it. And those who are beneficiaries of it will get what they have to get out of it.
What happened to that project, the Moloto Rail project?
Well, when I left office, we had said to the minister, the earlier minister, Minister Dipuo Peters, that this project is not doable based on the study that was done by National Treasury. I don't know what is the status of that project now.
But to your knowledge, it has not been implemented.
It has not been implemented. There was, towards the last days of my office, some pronouncements that there would be the Chinese investors in that project, but I've got no further information on that.
Mr. Chairperson, you'll forgive me, but I'm going to go to a parallel concern that you have raised with the witness. The chairperson
I
is...
see we are at 1, but I suspect we are about to finish.
Yes.
Is my assessment correct?
Yes.
Because then we can finish and allow Mr. Molefe to go. Yes.
The chairperson has raised with you the following concern, that law enforcement authorities didn't do their job, notwithstanding the fact that all these complaints have been made to them, and nobody followed up upon it. But there were two civil cases that PRASA had been involved in. One is this Rufambo matter, in which you were successful to the tune of 3.5 billion rand. Do you know whether any attempts were made to secure the money that PRASA had paid those contractors for a contract that was said to have been tainted?
Chairperson, I do not know of any effort to secure that money, to get that money back. And the application was that the contract was unlawful, it needed to be set aside, and the court did so. The second part of it was that the locomotives should be returned to, our argument should be returned to the supplier, and the supplier should pay back the money. At the time, 2.6 billion rand had already been paid, and only 13 locomotives had been delivered when we said we don't want any more to be delivered. In the interim, if council allows me, Vosloo was bought by a company, a Swiss company called Stadler Rail. And when I was already now out of the board of PRASA, I got communication that said Stadler Rail want to talk, they want to make good of the wrongs of Vosloo, that they were willing to consider paying back the money, but they also would not be willing to, they can leave those locomotives which are already in the country. If there was any adjustment to be made for them to be usable, they were willing to do so. But suddenly, the person who approached me said, no, they have now advised that they don't want to go that route. Obviously, I would still have referred them to the board, and, because I wouldn't have been able to make any decision on the matter. So that money, I think, is one of the issues that perhaps the Commission should ask the executive authority and the board to explain what is being done about it. I know that Minister Maswangani, when he came in, one of the things he was saying was that, no, those locomotives are okay, they should be used. And that was against the backdrop of a judgment that had annulled that contract. That's what we have to deal with.
So, to the best of your knowledge, and I accept that you say that your knowledge might not be up to date, but to the best of your knowledge, those locomotives are probably sitting somewhere that were delivered. Sitting somewhere
the
within
ones
the
that
country.
had not been delivered yet.
And then those that had not been delivered remain undelivered because nobody has Nobody has done anything about these matters after your board had left.
Those that had not been delivered are probably still in Barcelona. And those who were delivered, as I understand it, with there was an application for the liquidation of Sifambo Rail, and they were put to auction. I don't know how many of them were sold in that auction.
And the money, I think you said 2.6, that had already been paid.
That is correct, yes.
And that was already paid to Sifambo? Or to...
That is so.
Yes.
Although Sifambo was a conduit,
Yes.
it would get the money and
pass it on.
passed it on, most of it to Vosloo.
Yes. So that's the money that you are saying you don't think anybody has done anything to get it back, despite the judgments declaring that the contract was invalid.
That's correct, and I recall sending a WhatsApp message to the interim chairperson of the board, the last board,
Ms. Koyama. Ms. Koyama.
Ms. Koyama, and it was in the context of an article I had read in the papers that the previous boards would be called to Parliament to account, and I said, but I'd asked for this public hearing. I would welcome that.
Yes.
And then I said, well, your
Here's
next
one
step now is to send these locomotives back and get your money
Yes.
in your country.
Yes.
But it ended there. There was nothing more. That was that.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there should be no scarcity of state functionaries and bodies who are interested in that money being recovered from the president to the minister, to the relevant DGs, to the board, to say the courts have made a declaration, steps should be taken to recover that money. Obviously, those who got the money might resist, but the fact that they will resist is no ground for people to do nothing to try and get it back.
Yes, please, Chairperson. The second matter, again parallel to what the Chairperson raised about the criminal issues, is in the Siangena matter, the amount involved, as I understand it now, with interest and so on, is in the region of 6 billion rand. Would that be about correct from your understanding?
That is the estimated amount, Chairperson.
Now, in regard to that issue, you first took to court in 2016. There were technical points taken. Then after you left, the second review was filed, and that is now to be heard in August. Do you know why it is taking so long to get that matter in court and debated before the judges?
As I recall it, again, it was a problem when an interim board was appointed before the interim board of Ms. Koyama. That interim board wanted to enter into negotiations to pay money to Siangena and not to proceed with the civil action. And perhaps that then links very well with the evidence of Mr. Holele, where he says that Mr. Moodley came to demand payment on the basis of what they said were guarantees that PRASA had given to Siangena, and which had also ballooned by that time to 1.5 billion.
So what we have is problem you raised yesterday. You don't have a permanent CEO, you only have acting CEOs. You don't have a permanent board, you only have acting boards. And for 5 years, effectively nothing has been done to secure for PRASA what is its due, to have criminals behind bars and to get the money back on behalf of taxpayers.
Chairperson, in respect of the group chief executive, yes, for 5 years approximately, there was no group chief executive. But in the intervening period, there have been 2 interim boards. And there is also now the administrator, who's like a substitute for the board. So at that level of accounting authority, there were people who should have acted.
But you know, 2-something billion, 1, you're talking lots of money here, taxpayers' money. Why, despite all of this being well known to the portfolio committee on transport, to members of parliament, to the executive, whether the executive at that time or the executive now, why is there no clear action that is known in the public domain is being pursued to get this money back, because this is taxpayers' money? So that's part of the worry. Why do you have 5 years without an institution having a CEO? Why interim boards? I mean, these questions just make you think that there may be quite something big behind this all of thing. This, how can there be no visible action to recover 2.6 billion rand lost by an organ of state from different functionaries and state organs? And yet we know the people on the ground have lots of needs that they need that need money. Why are these things just left hanging? Nobody seems to say, hang on. We remember what Mr. Molefe's board was doing. He is no longer there. But what has happened to that money? Mm-hmm. Who is following this up? Why is it like everybody just wants that to be forgotten? So the commission must look into that. Who has been doing what, and why have they not been doing, who has not been doing what they are supposed to do? Because, I mean, with the COVID-19 problem, I mean, a lot of money has been diverted from what projects that it was going to do. Now, all of that money would have been needed, but even without COVID-19, you know, if any organ of state loses money illegally that it shouldn't have lost, there should be a clear determination to recover it. I guess, Mr. Molefe, you may be looking at me and maybe feeling that I'm maybe feeling some frustration that you know about.
I am definitely chairperson. I can sense the chairperson's frustration.
Yeah.
But there's also something very interesting, I must say, to council that we had said we would connect the dots. I think chairperson has connected a lot of dots for us, so we're not going to have to spend a lot of time on that.
Okay. Well, I'm happy if that's that is. Yeah, but if there is anything left, we can finalize.
But why you yesterday said you would like to be given that opportunity, and the chairperson has laid the stage for you to connect the dots as you see it. We may see it differently, the chairperson differently from me, but it would be helpful to have your views, you being at the coal face of one of the biggest battles that state-owned entities have had with the executive. Would you then connect the dots?
Chairperson, thank you very much. We have traversed in our evidence a number of key areas of what happened. We spoke about, in the course of our evidence, a report called PRASA in turmoil, but which is, I think, SS6A, PM 16, I think we said that is what it's gonna be. And in the evidence that we have dealt with, we have seen a lot of correlation of what was happening in a number of institutions, or what ministers were doing, or what portfolio committees omitted to do or failed to do, the Speaker of Parliament, and so on. And all of it, when one looks at it, and of course we got some exhibits in the files here linked to, for example, the evidence of Mr. Mamabulo. I will not go specifically to that exhibit. When one looks at what has happened up until now, it all starts with the board of directors on November 9, 2014, demanding assurance that the 2.4 billion that the group executive, chief executive, through the FCIP was recommending for approval by the board, ostensibly for the modernization of Braamfontein Depot, that would have included some construction work, that would also have included the purchase of rails and turnouts. And we said, you say this is urgent, we agree. But as a board, we can't just agree to 2.4 billion being spent without being assured that the process followed was proper, that there was probity conducted on this tender. And we, Chairperson, of course, we had been lied to. The result was that we had to stop that procurement proceeding for that time because it had to be done properly. It had not been done properly, and the reports were there. So that's that. The second issue is when we learn about the interim report of the public protector, and we insist that the group CEO who has had that report, and which raises a number of questions that PRASA had not responded to adequately, be made available to the new board. These two key events happens, and immediately we receive, the board receives a letter of Mr. Montana saying he would not seek extension of his contract. Of course, he had verbally told me when I had just been appointed chairperson of the board that, he had been there for too long. He had previously wanted to leave, but the board at the time prevailed on him to stay. So that is that. Now, we as the board accept the fact that Mr. Montana will not seek a new contract and that we will not give that contract. But also, of course, now we are beginning to look at the investigations that have to be done arising out of the report of the Auditor General and, of course, what the public protector later on said. The report of Mr. Mama, the annexures to the affidavit of Mr. Mamabolo indicate that from that time onwards, Mr. Montana became very busy to meet with a range of organizations, one of them being SATAU, a union that was benefiting out of PRASA contract through Black Star and East Bashumi Trust. And he was bringing in groupings like your MKMVA, which is supposed to be the former military veterans of the ANC, the student organization called COSA, the Congress of South African Students, an organization which I mentioned earlier on in my evidence called the South African Commuter Organization, led by a man called Stephen Sangweni. They attempted also to draw the South African National Taxi Corporation, Santaco, into this campaign. The campaign is to say, bring Montana back, we want him back, and we must demonstrate that there are many institutions that say that this is our man. Of course, which is a document I have not tabled, but if the council might want to do so, it's a small, this is again a whistleblower's report that shows how directly Mr. Montana itself was involved in this thing. And how in one meeting when he was confronted by Satau in Cape Town, he says, and when they say to him, but why do you want us to support your campaign? Because you told the board you want to go. The board accepted your wish. And he said, yeah, I blundered. I did that. But I thought that this board the chairman and the board would persuade me, would try to persuade me to stay on. The chairperson will recall that this is similar to what I said in my earlier evidence of how his contract earlier on had been extended, because he said to the board he was leaving. The board said, no, but why are you leaving? And then he came with a bogus, a fake offer of a job from a company called Gypsum Fertilizers. And the board had to then to match and actually be better what he said was the offer, and that was not true. So it is clear that he thought he would do a similar thing to this board. Now, I'm dealing with that, and then of course you begin to realize that your portfolio committee is beginning to talk his language, which is in this thing. And so
the statement being the
PRASA in turmoil.
Just remember, Mr. Soni, don't speak too far away from the mic, otherwise the transcript, the recording won't happen.
In turmoil. But maybe I should try quickly to bring these matters together. To say that there's a common thread that connects the termination of the contract of Mr. Montana, the acceptance of his wish by the board, his so-called PRASA in turmoil, the series of media attacks on the board of PRASA, all of which the substance is informed by this document called PRASA in turmoil. The refusal by the Minister of Transport to allow the board of PRASA to appoint a group CEO, ignoring the process of interviews that had happened, and later arguing that the company is not ready for that. And then foisting on the board of PRASA an appointee who was from her department to be the acting group CEO. And one of the issues that the board disagreed fundamentally with the minister on was when she wrote to the board to say that she's been told that the board is interfering in operations. Now, that again is linked to the document of PRASA in turmoil. The new person that the minister appoints take cue from this document and begin to complain that the board is interfering. The minister doesn't stop there. She goes on to say, I have directed the acting group CEO to review the practices, the performance of the board on governance in accordance with the best practices to determine whether they comply with the best practices. Basically saying the board is under administration of an appointee of the minister. So the board is being emasculated. Then you have the series of meetings of the portfolio committee. The attack there also is finding its genesis on this document, PRASA in turmoil. This document, in one page where Mr. Montana complains, refers to the fact that the board meets too often. It shouldn't be meeting more than 4 times a year. So those members of the PCOT latch on the argument of Mr. Montana, which shows that we're dealing with a coordinated campaign. Then you have, following this PRASA in turmoil, a meeting convened by the president, whose express purpose is to say, bring him back. And it is saying so because he says in PRASA in turmoil, I'm the best thing ever that this country has had in the rail business. And I understand also the geopolitical economic demands, geopolitical situation, and the regional challenges of regional integration. I'm the only one who can implement the decisions of the African Union. Nobody else here. And he says that this board knows nothing. The board led by Molefe knows nothing. All it knows is to interfere. And they say that we are causing divisions amongst management and so on. It's again in this document. And in this document, they say that there's a state of paralysis in the company because the board is fighting with management, which is not true. So the president, Mr. Jeff Radebe, called us to that meeting. They allow him to present a long speech informed by PRASA in turmoil. And it's all about how bad the chairman of the board and the board is. Of course, to some extent also saying how bad the minister of transport was. So it goes on like that. Then you have the minister who later on says to us, stop your investigations. And she says so. Again, there is a document here that shows one of the irregular briefings to the minister on what we were uncovering in our investigations and steps that we had taken. My letter also, in reply to the minister when he said close down the investigations, detailed the importance of these investigations and what we had done. And it also says to her, by the way, don't plead ignorance. Not in so many words, of course, but you know that we have been giving you reports, and it sets out meetings that had taken place, one at the international airport, one at the worksmen's offices, the other one at Rivonia offices. And these reports were revealing some of the things that Chairperson was talking about and connecting the dot, saying the behavior here appears to suggest that there are some people in powerful places who are benefiting and would not want action to be taken. So I parked that. The minister, having failed to do that, look for other ways of dealing with us. But before that, we make an application to law enforcement agencies and the NPA, which we referred to. Nothing happens. Instead, they get emasculated. Good people are removed who would have been able to ensure that action is taken. They are removed. Those who are brought in who are cronies do nothing. There's a systematic also weakening of the NPA, of course, following the appointment of Mr. Sean Abrams. So all of these actions seem to point to protect the protection of certain individual or a group, individuals or a group of people or a section of the people. As if that is not enough, the minister now appearing to be frustrated that none of their tricks in the book are working, summarily dismisses the board of directors, and having done so, does nothing about the work that that board had done. But it doesn't end there. We have the governing party, we have the government, we have had senior people who are officials. All of these things were reported to them. So therefore, when you connect all of these dots, they suggest that there might well be a common purpose served by this corruption that is happening. And none of these people with the authority to make decisions wanted to upset the apple cart. They wanted to preserve that continuing as it was continuing, regardless of how much misery was caused to the people, the poor people of this country, the poor commuters of this country, by billions which were being siphoned off, which should have served our people. But that situation also suggests that if there are good people out there, they are overwhelmed by the bad apples, so much that the bad apples have more power than them, and therefore they are unable to assert their authority over the bad apples. But what, in a broader context, what does this say to us? It says to us the democracy that so many paid so dearly for is being undermined, is being incapacitated. But it also says that you are actually, by failing to deal with these sorts of things, creating a situation where you might end up with an autocratic rule in this country, where the constitution of the country, the institution of public representation of our people become meaningless to the poor, that they no longer serve as the voice of those who elected people who serve in those institutions. We don't have to go too far, but to look just here, the United States, and see what is happening there. And I mentioned this yesterday, that there is a danger in allowing an individuals to have unassailable powers in a democratic order. In fact, in the debate of the impeachment, many speakers, speaker after speaker, said, when we adopted the Constitution of the United States of America, we were not adopting a constitution that would institute a monarchy. So we don't want a king, we want the commander-in-chief who's the president and representing our people. If you look at what is happening in Brazil now, you have a president who doesn't care how much COVID-19 is killing our people. So, Chairperson, in summary, therefore, what the evidence that we have given here points to is that state capture seems to have successfully captured key people in the governing party, and the governing party having been captured, allowing further capturing of organs of state through which it has to execute its responsibilities as the government of the day or as the state. So it itself has been paralyzed. And it also says that, I'm not going to make many people happy, but it also says that the governing party and various political parties need to take a lesson from the leaf of this corruption fight, that unless you deal frontally with corruption in political institutions, particularly those who have the authority to act on behalf of the poor people, using parliament, using other organs of state as instruments to advance the interests of the poor people and to protect their wishes expressed in term after term election in parliament. Unless you deal with that question within the parties themselves, this corruption is not going to end. It's not going to end. And I say I'm not covering myself in glory in saying what I am saying, but it has to be said because we have tried to allow things to happen, expecting people would act in a manner that is ethical, that reflects courage by those put in office to lead, that places the interests of the people and the country first, rather than sectarian interests of little groups in the country. The interests of the Constitution first. We're trying to get that to be done. It's not happening. So we need to have a crescendo of voices now that say, act, and act now, you are wrong. Don't sing as a ritual about how you are opposed to corruption. Demonstrate with your action. Demonstrate in how you hold organs of state, including boards and management of the SOEs, accountable, that you mean business as professed in your anti-corruption statement. I thought I should make that point and to say all of what we have seen start with the removal of Mr. Montana. The question that then would arise is, was he placed there for a purpose rather than that of running this all-important public good delivering organization, and to serve the poor people of our country, to ensure that we achieve the objectives set out in the mandate of the Legal Succession to South African Transport Services Act.
Well, Mr. Molefe, you might not have covered yourself in glory by saying certain things in the eyes of certain people, but I think certainly a lot of what you have said needs to be said. And in the eyes of those who put the interests of the country first, and in the eyes of those who are really committed to serving the public, serving the poor. Some of the things you have said should make them very happy. Part of what you have said raises issues that I continue to be concerned with as I look at what this commission is doing and what it should be doing and what areas it should be focusing on. And I know that for quite some time I've been placing a lot of emphasis on the issue of the role of Parliament in terms of oversight. But it may be that part of the problem is that if a senior official within the governing party, for example, is aware that another senior member of the governing party or a leader, one of the leaders, is involved in wrongdoing, he or she will be afraid to do what is right and say, but you can't do this. And the organization must take action when you, as a member of the organization, do this, because you are bringing the name of this organization into disrepute. He or she may be afraid to take that stand because maybe she needs or he needs that leader in order to progress in her political career. Or he or she needs the supporters of that leader to vote for him or her next time she wants or he wants to ascend to a higher position, or next time he or she wants to have his or her name put in the list of those to go to Parliament or to the legislature. And if I am in Parliament and I'm a member of the governing party, and I see that somebody within the governing party who is in government, who is in the executive, whether the person is the president or whether the person is a minister, and I know my obligation to hold them to account, and I'm thinking about doing my job properly, I get scared because that person, if he is president, he's the person that I rely on to make me a minister or to make me a deputy minister. Or he and his supporters are the people that I rely on to be made chairperson of a committee in Parliament. If I stand up and do my job properly in Parliament, in keeping with the oath of office that I've taken when I became a member of Parliament, which effectively says the country first, the people first. I decide not to do my job properly because I can't be minister, I can't be deputy minister, I can't be chairperson of the portfolio committee if I displease these people. If I ask them difficult questions, they are going to ask me, are you a member of my party or are you a member of the opposition? And if I'm a minister and I see another colleague who is a minister, that he or she is not doing the right things, here is a board that is supposed to have enough members to have a quorum. He or she is not appointing those members. The board has to go to court in order to get their job done that is supposed to be done by an organ of state. I don't say anything, even if I'm aware, because I read about these things in the newspapers, because I know that if I raise those things, I'm going to be unpopular within government, within the executive, or within the governing party. And I'll be limiting my career. Or I will be without a job if I get fired, either for this or for something else, because I'm asking too many questions. I'm supposed to maybe mind my own business, look at my own department. I'm not supposed to ask these questions. And if I am the president, and I see that a certain department is not run properly, and that minister is not doing a proper job, maybe I won't fire them because they have a constituency that I'm going to need when next time I want to be re-elected as president. If I take action against that minister who has got that kind of support, he or she is going to go out and mobilize support so that when next I want to be elected or re-elected as president, I won't succeed. Other people, somebody else, will be put up. It may well be that unless these issues are resolved, whatever we do as a country in trying to reduce the levels of corruption significantly is not going to be effective. It may well be that we need a president who is going to be in a position to stand up in Parliament and say, when members of Parliament coming from the governing party don't ask me difficult questions to hold me accountable, I know they're not doing their job and they should not be here. When you don't ask my ministers difficult questions coming from the same party, I know you are not doing your job. But your party requires you to do this job. And it is not a career-limiting thing for you to ask difficult questions to ministers coming from your own party, to your own president, in the interests of the country, and in order to make sure that these high levels of corruption are brought down. It may be that the country needs somebody who can stand up and say, start with me. Start with me. The more questions you ask me, the more I realize you are a good member of the governing party. You're a good member of Parliament. Well, I'm sure some will say, I'm just dreaming. Such a thing can never happen. But it seems that we need something quite drastic. Maybe we need somebody who is not going to be looking at even a re-election to start changing things. We need somebody who's just going to say, let's do the right thing, everybody. Let's do the right thing for the sake of the country. The country comes first. The people come first. Because when there are elections, I'm sure every political party will tell the voters, the people come first. But we need to see this in action. We need to see in action. We don't need speeches of how people say they are committed to fighting corruption. When it comes to this commission, we also need actions to show that people are supporting the commission by coming to the commission to give evidence. You have come to the commission. You have come here many times and you have given evidence. I have no doubt that there are many other senior members of the governing party who know a lot that should come before the commission, who have not come before the commission. I know there are others who have come before the commission, and we are grateful for what they have done. But there are many others, I have no doubt, but who have not come before the commission. And because they don't come to the commission to give evidence, to give information to the commission, they are failing to contribute to a solution to some of these problems of state capture and corruption in our country. Excuse me. But I thank you for the contribution that you are making. There will be people who will come and they'll give evidence, and they will, some of them maybe will say that what you have said is not true and whatever. And I've made no findings about whether what you say is true or not. I'll make findings later on. But for the fact that you came here and you said the things that you believe need to be said, you shared with the commission your experiences, I'm grateful that you had the courage to do that. And I just wish there were more people who would come and help the commission in that way. Thank you very much, Mr. Molefe. Thank you.
Mr. Molefe, after that rousing address by the chairperson, on behalf of the process stream, I just want to say to you, I know how you must have agonized over whether you should make the revelations you should. Can I just make this observation? True patriotism is speaking truth, speaking truth to power in the most difficult circumstances. And we hope that your coming here is going to be a clarion call for other patriots who have done so much for our country. Because unless patriots like you do come, we are not going to find the solution that the chairperson has been asked to forge so that we can move the country forward. Mr. Chairperson, may I say you're not the only dreamer, as John Lennon said. We all are.
No, thank you very much. We can release Mr. Molefe now. Yes. We are at 2 minutes to 2. I think we'll take a lunch break that will go up to 3.
Yes.
Yeah. But once again, thank you very much, Mr. Molefe. We really appreciate your having come here and assisted the commission. We really appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure, Chairperson.
Thank you. You are released. We'll take the lunch break and resume at 3 o'clock.
As you please, Chairperson.
We adjourn.
All rise.
Yes. Popo, whatever else you have, you must give to us, because at the end of the day, this is an ongoing